The manager humiliated her daily, until she married his boss. Emily Parker discreetly wiped away a tear as she organized reports that Richard Thompson, her manager, had criticized for the third time that day. After 5 years working at the prestigious Pinnacle Bank in downtown New York City, she still endured daily humiliations for her simple background and modest appearance. It was during yet another afternoon of baseless criticism that the unexpected happened. The doors of the executive elevator opened, and Daniel Harrison, the newly appointed bank president, entered the department for the first time. His eyes met Emily's just as Richard yelled at her for a mistake she hadn't even made. Emily swallowed the lump in her throat, trying to maintain her composure. At 35, she stayed in that job out of necessity. She alone supported her mother, Mrs. Dorothy, who suffered from a degenerative illness and needed expensive medical treatments. The salary was good, despite the toxic environment created by Richard, a 45-year-old man who seemed to take pleasure in belittling her at every opportunity. "Emily, these numbers are all wrong," Richard shouted, throwing the spreadsheets onto her desk, while the other employees pretended not to notice. "I don't know why I still keep you here. An assistant who can't even organize basic numbers." "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson," she replied in a controlled voice, "but I checked these figures 3 times and they're correct. If you look at page 4, you'll see that I don't care what you think." Emily cut her off. "Redo everything by the end of the day, or we'll have a serious talk with HR tomorrow." What Richard didn't realize was that Daniel Harrison, standing just a few feet away, was watching the entire scene. Tall, with slightly graying hair at his temples and an elegant demeanor, the 42-year-old new president silently assessed the situation. The next morning, Emily arrived early to redo all the work, even though she knew it was correct. On her desk, she found an envelope bearing the president's letterhead. Her hands trembled as she opened the paper, which contained a simple request. "Report to the president's office at 10 a.m., Daniel Harrison." Her heart pounded the entire way to the 30th floor. Had Richard complained about her to the president? Would she lose her job? How would she pay for her mother's treatments? The president's executive assistant, Margaret Wilson, a poised 62-year-old woman, greeted her with a warm smile, something rare in those cold marble and glass hallways. "He's expecting you, dear." "Don't worry, Dr. Daniel doesn't bite." Entering the spacious office overlooking Fifth Avenue, Emily found Daniel standing by the window. He turned with a kind smile that contrasted with the room's seriousness. "Miss Parker, thank you for coming. Please, have a seat," he said, gesturing to the comfortable chair in front of his imposing dark wood desk. "Mr. Harrison, if this is about the reports, I can explain." "Actually," he interrupted calmly, "it's about what I witnessed yesterday. Those reports were perfect. I checked them myself." Emily blinked, confused. "You checked them?" "Yes. And it wasn't the first time I've heard about Mr. Thompson's behavior. I'm restructuring the bank and need competent, honest people on my team. People like you, Emily." That 20-minute conversation would completely change her life. By the end of the meeting, Emily left the president's office as Daniel Harrison's new direct assistant, with a salary 3 times higher and a new office on the 30th floor. The look on Richard's face when he heard the news was a trophy Emily would cherish forever. What neither of them could have imagined was that this promotion would be just the beginning of a much bigger story. The morning after her promotion, upon arriving at her new office on the 30th floor, Emily found a small bouquet of white roses with a card from Margaret. "Welcome, dear. A few tips to survive up here. The machine coffee is terrible. Bring your own. The executives love talking about their achievements, so listen with interest and never ever show insecurity. I'm here for whatever you need." That unexpected gesture brought tears to Emily's eyes. In 5 years at the bank, it was the first time someone had shown her solidarity. Later, she discovered that Margaret had also faced her share of hardships. Widowed at 40 with 3 children to raise, she endured years of sexist remarks before earning the executive's respect through her undeniable competence. "We women from humble backgrounds must be 10 times better to be considered half as good as they are," Margaret confided during lunch. "But once we prove our worth, no one can take that away from us." Meanwhile, on the 12th floor, Richard was seething with anger. During a departmental meeting, He couldn't hold back his venom. So the little secretary became an overnight princess. "You all know how someone climbs that fast in this company, don't you?" he insinuated to his colleagues, who laughed nervously. What Richard didn't know was that Justin, a young intern who admired Emily for the way she always treated him with respect, sent an anonymous email to the bank's ethics hotline reporting the inappropriate comment. The incident earned Richard a formal warning from HR. In the weeks that followed, Emily proved why she deserved the position. Her impeccable organization and strategic vision increasingly impressed Daniel, who began trusting her not just with professional matters. "Do you think my daughter would like this?" he asked one day, showing her a jewelry catalogue. "Olivia's birthday is next week, and ever since her mother passed, I never know what to get her." "How old is your daughter, sir?" 23. "She's finishing law at Columbia." Emily smiled, pointing to a delicate white gold bracelet with a small sapphire. Something elegant but understated, perfect for a young lawyer. That small moment created a new closeness between them. Daniel, widowed 3 years earlier, seemed to find in Emily not just an excellent professional, but someone with whom he could share the small daily decisions. Meanwhile, Richard watched from afar, consumed by envy. He began spreading rumors through the bank's halls. "Isn't it obvious how she got that promotion?" he whispered to colleagues during coffee breaks. Always leaving the president's office late, picking out gifts for his daughter." What few knew was that Richard's bitterness ran deep. The son of a small shopkeeper who went bankrupt when he was a teenager, he grew up hearing his father repeat that the rich only get richer by stepping on the poor. He studied obsessively to get into a public university, convinced his degree would be his passport to a world where he'd finally be respected. But reality was harsher, even with his diploma. The doors of big corporations didn't open easily. He was rejected in multiple interviews before landing an administrative assistant role at Pinnacle Bank, where he worked for 12 years before being promoted to manager. At that moment, he swore to himself he'd never be humiliated or sidelined again. Unfortunately, Richard mistook respect for fear. He believed humiliating subordinates was the only way to maintain his power. In Emily, he saw everything he had once been, someone from a humble background fighting to survive in an elitist corporate world, and it stirred in him a mix of contempt and identification that deeply unsettled him. His wife, Tiffany, had tried many times to show him how his toxic behavior was destroying not only his work environment, but also his marriage and his relationship with their 17-year-old son, Tyler. "You're becoming just like your boss at Pioneer Metalworks, the one who made you suffer so much," Tiffany said one night after Richard came home particularly irritated. He simply replied, "You have to be tough in this world. You don't understand anything about business." The malicious insinuations soon reached Olivia Harrison, who began eyeing Emily with suspicion during her visits to the bank. The tension escalated when Daniel invited Emily to accompany him on a business trip to Chicago. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. What no one knew was that Emily was keeping a secret. Before working at the bank, she had completed 3 years of business administration, dropping out when her mother fell ill. Her competence didn't come by chance, but from interrupted dreams and unrecognized knowledge. During the trip to Chicago, staying at the same hotel, Daniel and Emily spent hours working on an important proposal for a new client. By the time they finished, it was past midnight. "I think we deserve to celebrate," Daniel said, opening a bottle of wine from the room. "This account could mean a huge leap forward for the bank." "Congratulations on handling the negotiation so well," she replied, accepting the glass he offered. "The presentation was perfect thanks to you." For a moment their gazes met differently. Emily felt her face flush and looked away, pretending to admire the city's night view through the window. "Emily, can I ask you something personal?" Daniel's voice sounded closer. He had quietly stepped nearer. "Of course, sir. Why would someone as smart and capable as you let Richard mistreat you for so long?" The question caught Emily off guard. With a sigh, she told him about her sick mother, the interrupted college years, the endless medical bills. She spoke about being the only child of a teacher retired due to disability, and how the bank's salary, despite everything, allowed her to give her mother the treatment she needed. "You're extraordinary," Daniel murmured, his hand lightly brushing hers on the table. At that moment, an invisible line was crossed. Emily quickly pulled her hand away. "It's getting late. I should go back to my room." "Good night, Mr. Harrison." In the hallway on the way to her room, Emily felt her heart racing. It wasn't just fear of compromising her professional position. It was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions she hadn't expected to feel. There was something about Daniel that went beyond professional admiration, something that both frightened and drew her in. Locked in her room, Emily called her mother, as she did every night when traveling. "So, my dear, how was your day?" Mrs. Dorothy asked in her affectionate voice. "Confusing, Mom, very confusing." "Confusing how?" Emily hesitated. Since adolescence, she had shared everything with her mother, but how could she explain something she didn't even understand herself? "I think I'm developing feelings for my boss," she finally confessed, almost in a whisper. On the other end of the line, Mrs. Dorothy was silent for a few seconds before responding, "You're worried about what others will think." It wasn't a question, but an observation. "It's more complicated than that, Mom. He's only been a widower for 3 years, has a daughter who already looks at me with suspicion, and I'm his direct subordinate. People are already talking." "Emily, my dear, you spent 5 years enduring humiliation because you were afraid of what would happen if you lost your job. Now you're afraid of what will happen if you follow your heart. At some point, you'll need to live without fear." The simple, direct words from her mother touched Emily deeply. Yet when she hung up the phone, her resolution was firm. She would maintain a professional distance from Daniel, for both their sakes. When they returned to New York City, something had shifted between them. Lingering glances, restrained smiles, a careful effort to keep an appropriate distance when others were around. Richard noticed quickly. During a lunch with other managers, he insinuated that Emily was climbing the corporate ladder horizontally. The gossip reached Olivia, who confronted her father during a family dinner. "Everyone's talking about you and your assistant, Dad," she blurted. "How do you think that makes me feel? It's barely been 3 years since Mom passed." Daniel turned pale. "There is nothing between Miss Parker and me beyond professional respect, and I'm disappointed you'd listen to malicious gossip." But the damage was done. Daniel began keeping his distance from Emily, who interpreted his retreat as regret for their moment of closeness in Chicago. The following weeks were marked by painful formality between them. To make matters worse, Mrs. Dorothy's condition worsened, requiring hospitalization. The doctors recommended an experimental treatment not covered by insurance. Desperate about the costs, Emily began looking for a second job for nights and weekends. That's when Richard approached her with an offer. "I heard your mother is sick," he said, feigning concern as he cornered her in the empty bank parking lot. "And I also know her treatment costs a small fortune." "What do you want, Richard?" she asked, too exhausted to pretend courtesy. "I can help with the money. I have some profitable investments. In exchange, I just need a few details about the board's decisions before they go public." Emily stared at him in disbelief. "You're asking me to sell confidential information? I'm offering a solution to your problem. What's worth more, your ethics or your mother's life?" Her stomach dropped. For a brief moment in her desperation, the offer almost seemed reasonable. Almost. "No, Richard, never." He shrugged. "Think it over. The offer stands. After all, what else could you do? Seduce the president for money?" "Oh, wait. You're already doing that, aren't you?" The slap hit his face before Emily realized what she'd done. Richard grabbed her wrist tightly. "You'll regret this," he hissed. Neither of them noticed Olivia Harrison watching the entire scene from her car, where she'd stopped to take a call. The next morning, Emily was called into Daniel's office again. Her heart was heavy, certain she'd be fired after the incident with Richard, who would have surely twisted the story. When she entered, she found not just Daniel, but also Olivia. Their serious expressions made her feel even worse. "Emily, my daughter told me what she saw in the parking lot yesterday," Daniel began. "Sir, I can explain." "You don't have to," Olivia interrupted, surprising Emily. I heard everything. His blackmail, his threat, and I saw when he grabbed your arm after you, after you did what anyone would do. Emily looked from Olivia to Daniel, confused. I also heard about your mother, he continued. Why didn't you tell me she'd gotten worse? I didn't want to mix personal problems with work, sir. Daniel exchanged a glance with his daughter before speaking again. I've arranged for your mother to be transferred to Mount Sinai Hospital. The treatment will be covered by the bank as part of a special program for employees in exceptional circumstances. Emily's legs weakened and she had to steady herself against the desk. But why? It was Olivia who answered. Because you're the only person at this bank who treats my father like a human being, not just a position or a bank account. And because you deserve it. Olivia's words surprised Emily. The young woman who had always seemed so distant and cold now showed a vulnerability that touched her heart. That afternoon, after the meeting, Olivia invited Emily for coffee. In a small pastry shop 2 blocks from the bank, away from the curious eyes of their colleagues, Olivia opened her heart. My mother was exceptional, she began, stirring her cappuccino absent-mindedly. Elizabeth Harrison was a pediatric surgeon, saving lives every day. When she got sick, it was as if the world had lost its colors for me and my father. Emily listened in silence, realizing how hard it was for Olivia to talk about this. During her illness, I saw many nurses and aides treat her as just another patient, while others treated her with dignity until the end. I learned then that a person's character is revealed in how they treat others, especially when they have nothing to gain from it. Olivia took a sip of her coffee before continuing. When my father started talking about you, I noticed a change in him. He began smiling again, making plans. I admit I was jealous. It felt like he was betraying my mother's memory by liking you. I understand, Olivia, truly. But then I saw what happened in the parking lot. I saw how Richard treated. You heard the awful things he said, and yet you remained dignified. And I realized I was judging you for the wrong reasons. A tear rolled down Olivia's face. Do you know what my mother told me before she passed? Take care of your father, but let him be happy again. I don't think I truly understood what she meant until yesterday. Emily reached out and squeezed Olivia's hand. Your mother must have been an incredible woman to have raised someone like you. She was. And she would have liked you, Emily, I'm sure of it. That was the first of many heartfelt conversations between the 3 of them. Olivia, who had resisted the idea of any woman getting close to her father after her mother's passing, began to see Emily not as a threat, but as an ally. In the following weeks, as Mrs. Dorothy responded well to her new treatment, Emily returned to working closely with Daniel. Their previous formality gave way to a genuine professional partnership, though both carefully avoided any situation that could be misinterpreted. Richard, meanwhile, intensified his smear campaign, now including Olivia in his insinuations, suggesting the naive girl had been manipulated. The final straw came during the bank's year-end party. Richard, after a few glasses of whiskey, approached Emily while she was chatting with some colleagues. There's our rising star, he said loudly enough for several executives to hear. Tell us, Emily, what's it like sleeping with the boss? Is the mattress as soft as the paycheck? Oh, deadly silence fell over the group. Emily's face burned with humiliation. Before she could respond, a voice cut through the air. The only one about to lose his job here is you, Richard. Olivia had approached unnoticed. Beside her, Daniel seemed to be containing a rarely seen fury. To my office now, he ordered Richard. The party continued under a tense atmosphere. Half an hour later, Richard left the president's office with a pale face and walked straight past the guests toward the exit. Daniel returned to the party as if nothing had happened, but avoided getting close to Emily for the rest of the night. The next morning, an official announcement declared Richard Thompson's termination for conduct incompatible with the institution's values. In the same memo, Daniel announced a restructuring. Emily Parker would be the new institutional relations manager, reporting directly to the president. The promotion brought not only professional recognition, but also a new challenge for Emily and Daniel: how to handle the growing feelings between them without compromising their reputations. Meanwhile, in a small apartment in Queens, New York City, Richard Thompson sank into bitterness. He had managed to get a job at a smaller bank with a significantly lower salary and none of the prestige he was used to. The nights became a torment of insomnia and self-doubt. "You need to let this go, Richard," insisted Tiffany, watching her husband lose weight and drown in resentment. "This obsession is destroying our family." It was true. Tyler, their teenage son, was growing more distant from his father. The sensitive and intelligent boy suffered at school from inevitable comparisons. "Isn't your dad that manager who got fired for harassment?" Classmates, children of other Pinnacle Bank employees would ask. One night, Tyler confronted his father during dinner. "Why did you treat people that way, especially Mrs. Emily?" Richard, caught off guard by the direct question, was speechless. "You know her?" he finally managed to ask. "Everyone knows the story, Dad. At school, teachers even use the case as an example of workplace bullying. It's humiliating to be your son." The words hit Richard like a punch to the gut. For the first time, he saw himself through his son's eyes, not as the powerful executive he thought he was, but as a petty man who bullied the weak to feel important. That night, while Tiffany and Tyler slept, Richard found an old box of photos. From his youth, pictures of him smiling, surrounded by friends, his eyes bright with hope. When had he lost that light? When had he let bitterness consume him so completely? With tears in his eyes, Richard made a decision. He would seek professional help to understand his destructive behavior patterns, not for the lost job or tarnished reputation, but to regain his son's respect, and perhaps his own. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, over the following months, Emily flourished in her new position. Her talent for negotiations and strategic vision earned her the respect of even the most skeptical executives. Meanwhile, her mother improved steadily with her new treatment. One afternoon in June, as the New York winter began to show its colder side, Olivia appeared unannounced in Emily's office. "We need to talk," the young woman said, closing the door behind her. Emily felt a chill down her spine. Had she done something wrong? "Of course, Olivia. Is something the matter?" Olivia sat down and looked Emily straight in the eyes. "It's about my father. He hasn't been the same since my mother passed. For 3 years I've watched him bury himself in work, forgetting how to live, until you came along." Emily swallowed hard. "Olivia, your father and I only have a professional relationship. Please don't treat me like a child," Olivia interrupted with a sad smile. "I see how you look at each other when you think no one's watching. And for the first time in 3 years, I see my father genuinely smiling. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. I just want you to know that if there's something between you, or if there ever is, I won't stand in the way. Quite the opposite." The conversation left Emily deeply conflicted. On one hand, she couldn't deny her feelings for Daniel. On the other, she feared the consequences for her career and reputation. After all, she had worked hard to get where she was. 2 weeks later, Daniel announced a business trip to Miami and asked Emily to accompany him. During the 1-hour flight, they only talked about work, but there was a palpable tension in the air. Staying at the same hotel in South Beach, they wrapped up the day's meetings, and Daniel invited her to dinner at the hotel restaurant. The evening was perfect, with the sea breeze and the view of the beach bathed in the light of the full moon. "I can't pretend anymore, Emily," he said after a long silence. "Pretend what, sir?" "That I feel nothing for you beyond professional admiration." Emily felt her heart race. It was the first time either of them had put into words what had been lingering between them for months. "Daniel, this could complicate so many things. I know, believe me, I've thought about every possible complication, but I've also thought about what it means to let the chance for happiness slip away again, just because I'm afraid of what others might say." He reached across the table, lightly touching her fingers. "I'm not asking for an answer right now. I just want you to know my feelings are real. They have nothing to do with your position at the bank or anything else beyond who you are." That night, each retreated to their room with much to think about. The next morning over breakfast, Emily gave her answer. "I have feelings for you too, Daniel, but we need to do this right. For us, for Olivia, and for everyone at the bank." They agreed to maintain absolute professional distance at work, while getting to know each other better outside the corporate environment. Their discreet meetings, dinners at restaurants far from the financial district, Sunday strolls in Central Park, visits to art exhibitions, allowed their relationship to develop naturally. Olivia was the first to know during a dinner where Daniel invited her along with Emily to his home. The young woman didn't hide her approval, embracing Emily with genuine affection. "Welcome to the family officially," she whispered in her ear. Life finally seemed to be falling into place for Emily. Her mother was improving every day, her career was soaring, and her heart found peace with Daniel. But a shadow from the past still loomed. Richard Thompson, now working at a small investment bank on the outskirts of New York City, had never gotten over his dismissal. The humiliation of being replaced by someone he'd always treated as inferior consumed him. When he heard through former colleagues that Daniel and Emily were together, he saw his chance for revenge. Using contacts in the financial press, he planted a story about favoritism and conflicts of interest at Pinnacle Bank. Without naming anyone directly, the article insinuated that an employee had been rapidly promoted due to an intimate relationship with the CEO. The piece exploded like a bomb in the financial world. The bank's board called an emergency meeting, demanding explanations from Daniel. Devastated, Emily offered her resignation letter. "Absolutely not," Daniel said, tearing the paper in front of her. "I won't let lies destroy your career or our relationship." At the board meeting, Daniel was direct. "Yes, I am in a relationship with Mrs. Parker." No, it did not begin before her promotion, which was based solely on her professional merit, as demonstrated by her department's results over the past 6 months. "If the board considers this a problem, I'm prepared to submit my resignation, but I won't lie or hide something that brings me happiness." The silence that followed was broken by William Montgomery, the board's longest-serving member, and a longtime friend of Daniel's father. "I've known this young man since he was a boy," he told the other board members, "and I knew his late wife, God rest her soul. If Daniel has found someone who makes him happy again, and that person is as capable as the numbers show, I don't see the problem. As long as professionalism is maintained in the workplace, your personal lives are none of our concern." After a brief deliberation, the board decided there was no ethical violation, since the relationship had developed after the promotion and did not interfere with either party's professional performance. The only recommendation was that, for transparency's sake, Emily should now report directly to the vice president instead of Daniel. The article was retracted after defamation lawsuit threats, and an internal investigation revealed Richard had been the source of the distorted information. The former manager received a formal warning from his new company and was barred from any contact with Pinnacle Bank. 6 months later, during a weekend at Daniel's beach house in the Hamptons, he proposed. With Olivia and Mrs. Dorothy as the only witnesses, Emily said yes through tears of happiness. The wedding was simple and elegant, held in the garden of Daniel's home in Beverly Hills. Only close family and friends were invited, including Margaret, the executive secretary who had always treated Emily with respect. After the ceremony, as they danced their first dance as a couple, Daniel whispered in Emily's ear, "Who would have thought I'd find love again that day I walked into the department and saw an extraordinary woman being mistreated by a mediocre man? Who would have thought that terrible day would be the start of the best chapter of my life?" she replied, resting her head on his shoulder. Across town, Richard flipped through the society section of the newspaper and saw the wedding photo. Sitting alone in his small apartment, he finally understood how much he'd lost because of his arrogance and cruelty. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. A year after the wedding, Emily and Daniel faced new challenges. Pinnacle Bank was undergoing international expansion, opening branches in the United Kingdom and other English-speaking countries. As a result, Daniel's travels became more frequent and prolonged. Emily, now director of the Institutional Relations Department, managed her own team and handled increasing responsibilities. Balancing personal and professional life grew harder for the couple. During a late-night video call with Daniel in London and Emily in New York City, the tension finally surfaced. "We need to talk about this, Daniel," she said, exhausted after a long workday. "We're living like two executives who occasionally share the same house, not like a married couple. I know it's been tough, my love, but it's just a phase. The European expansion will be done in a few months, and then we can what? Wait for the next expansion, the next big project?" Emily interrupted. "Maybe we should rethink some priorities." The silence that followed was painful for both. Daniel ran his hand through his hair, a gesture Emily knew well. He was worried. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "I don't know, Daniel. I just know that when I dreamed of having a family, I never imagined it would be like this." The word family hung between them. They talked about having children, but always concluded it wasn't the right time due to their career demands. Daniel took the first available flight back to New York City the next morning, surprising Emily by showing up at their apartment that same night. "We need to work this out in person, not over video," he explained, holding her tight. Over the weekend, they had long conversations about the future. Daniel confessed that his ambition to expand the bank internationally had become almost an obsession, a way to prove his worth to his father's legacy. Emily admitted that her extreme dedication to work stemmed from the fear of appearing to have gotten her position because she was the president's wife, not on merit. "We're letting the past control our present," Daniel concluded. "Me with my father's shadow, you with Richard's ghost and all those who doubted your competence." "And where does that leave us?" Emily asked. "At a point where we need to decide what we truly want." On Monday, Daniel called a meeting of the executive board. To everyone's surprise, he proposed a restructuring. He would appoint a CEO to manage the bank's daily operations while he remained as chairman of the board, with a more strategic and less hands-on role. "The international expansion is well underway. It's time to build the next generation of leaders for the bank," he explained to the board. The proposal was approved after intense debate. Michael Pearson, the current financial vice president, was named CEO, while Daniel took on a role that required less travel and allowed more flexibility. Emily, in turn, presented a project to create a talent development program within the bank, focused on low-income employees with unrecognized potential, people like she had once been. "I want to identify and develop those who have ability, but haven't had opportunities," she explained to her team. "I believe there's a lot of hidden talent in the lower levels of our own company." The project, named the Pinnacle Talent Program, became her passion. To dedicate herself fully to it, Emily decided to reduce her responsibilities as director, promoting her assistant, Jessica, to deputy director. With their professional changes underway, Emily and Daniel finally found space to build the family they wanted. When they discovered Emily was pregnant, the news was met with joy not just by them but also by Olivia and Mrs. Dorothy. A little brother or sister with a 24-year age gap. "Who would have thought," joked Olivia, who had graduated with a degree in law and was starting work in the bank's legal department. The pregnancy brought new perspectives for Emily. As she watched her body change, she reflected on all the transformations her life had undergone in recent years, from the humiliated secretary to the president's wife, soon-to-be mother, and creator of a social program within the bank. The journey had been intense and unexpected. During the baby shower organized by Margaret and other colleagues from the bank, Emily received a message that unsettled her. It was from Tiffany Thompson, Richard's ex-wife, asking to meet urgently. Reluctantly, Emily agreed to have coffee with Tiffany the following afternoon. She found a weary woman who seemed to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. "Thank you for coming," Tiffany began. "I know you have no obligation to hear me out after everything Richard did." "What happened, Tiffany? Why did you want to see me?" The woman took a deep breath before continuing. "Richard is very ill. Advanced stage cancer. The doctors give him only a few months." Emily felt a lump in her throat. Despite everything Richard had done to her, the news shook her. "I'm so sorry," she said sincerely. "But why are you telling me this?" "Because he's asking for forgiveness. He doesn't have the courage to say it in person, but he asked me to tell you. The treatment has made him reflect on the kind of person he was, the lives he hurt out of pride and envy." Emily fell silent, processing the information. "There's one more thing," Tiffany continued. "Richard has sold nearly everything he had to pay for treatment. Our son, Tyler, is about to start college, but now we have no way to afford it." "And what do you expect me to do?" "Nothing, really. I didn't come to ask for money. Richard forbade me from doing that. I only came because I promised him I'd deliver his request for forgiveness." That night, Emily told Daniel everything. Together, they reached a decision. That would surprise everyone. The following week, Tyler Thompson received a letter informing him that he had been selected as the first beneficiary of the newly created Pinnacle Talent Program, with a full college scholarship and an internship opportunity at the bank during breaks. When the embossed envelope arrived, there was a moment of confusion in the Thompson household. Tyler was at his prep course, studying for his engineering entrance exams, and it was Tiffany who received the mail. Upon seeing the Pinnacle Bank logo, her first instinct was to hide the letter. It must be another negative notice related to Richard's dismissal. But when she noticed it was addressed to her son and not her husband, she opened it with curiosity. Her hands trembled as she read the contents. It was an opportunity that solved their biggest problem: how to pay for Tyler's education, now that the family's financial situation had deteriorated. When Richard came home from work that night, he found his wife and son in an animated conversation in the kitchen, something that hadn't happened in months. "What's going on?" he asked, puzzled by the sudden shift in atmosphere. Tyler looked at his father with an expression hard to decipher, a mix of suspicion and hope. "I've been selected for a scholarship, Dad, at Pinnacle Bank." Richard felt his stomach drop. This could only be some kind of trap, a way to humiliate him further. "Let me see that letter," he demanded, holding out his hand. As he read the document, he searched for hidden messages, some malicious insinuation. But there was nothing beyond professional terms explaining the program and the scholarship conditions. And at the end, the signature that made his heart stop for a moment: Emily Parker Harrison. "Why would she do this?" he murmured, more to himself than to his family. "After everything I did." "Maybe that's exactly why, Dad," Tyler replied with a wisdom that surprised his father, "to show that it's possible to do things differently." That night, Richard couldn't sleep. His son's words echoed in his mind, mixing with memories of every time he had humiliated Emily. If anyone had the power to destroy his family completely now, it was her. Instead, she was offering his son an opportunity he himself couldn't provide. The letter, signed by Emily Parker Harrison, made no mention of Richard, nor did it indicate she knew who Tyler was. It was simply the fulfillment of the promise she had made to herself to find and nurture talents who only needed a chance. 2 months later, Emily gave birth to a baby girl named Grace in honor of Daniel's mother. As she held her newborn daughter in her arms, with Daniel by her side, she thought about how unpredictable life was. "If someone had told me back in those days when I swallowed my tears at my desk that one day I'd be here." Daniel kissed her forehead. "You always deserved this and more, my love. The world just took too long to realize it." Richard passed away 3 months later, never knowing about the opportunity given to his son. Emily discreetly attended the funeral, keeping her distance. She wasn't there to be seen or to receive thanks, but to close a chapter of her life and finally forgive the man who had caused her so much pain. On her way home, Emily passed by the old department where she had worked as a secretary. The faces had changed, but the dynamic seemed the same. Stressed people rushing to meet deadlines, phones ringing incessantly, the palpable pressure in the air. That's when she had a new idea for the Pinnacle Talent Program. In addition to identifying talent, it would also work to improve the work environment at all levels of the bank, especially in the most stressful departments. "If we can create an environment where people are respected regardless of their position, we'll have happier and more productive employees," she explained to Daniel that evening. "And fewer managers like Richard," he added. "Exactly. No one should have to endure humiliation to keep their job." The program expanded in the following years, gaining recognition in the financial sector and inspiring similar initiatives at other institutions. Tyler Thompson, after graduating with honors, was hired permanently by the bank, and became one of the most promising analysts of his generation. Olivia, who had initially resisted the idea of following in her father's footsteps in the financial world, found her own passion by coordinating the program's legal department, ensuring opportunities were distributed fairly and transparently. One spring afternoon, as Emily watched Grace, now 3 years old, playing in the garden of their home, she reflected on how her life had transformed. From fear and insecurity to confidence and fulfillment, from humiliation to recognition, from loneliness to the family she had built. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Margaret, now retired but still close to the family. "Emily, dear, have you seen the paper today? Your program has been nominated for the National Corporate Social Responsibility Award." After hanging up, Emily smiled, thinking about how some defeats can pave the way for much greater victories. Her phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. "Congratulations, my love. No one deserves this recognition more than you." As she watched Grace running through the garden, Emily thought of all the other people who, like her, endured daily humiliation in their jobs, unaware that their lives could change completely with just one opportunity, one moment of courage, one encounter that would alter everything. Perhaps this was her true mission now, to be for others what Daniel had been for her, not just a fair boss or a mentor, but someone who truly saw the potential hidden beneath layers of insecurity and fear. Grace ran up to her with a flower in her hand. "For you, Mommy." Emily hugged her daughter, feeling deep gratitude for the life she had now and for all the hardships that had shaped her. The manager who had humiliated her daily had unwittingly paved the way for her happiness, and that was perhaps the greatest irony and the greatest lesson of her entire journey. That night, lying beside Daniel, Emily shared an idea she had been nurturing for some time. "I've been thinking about writing a book about my experience in the program." "I think that's a wonderful idea," he replied, stroking her hair. "Your story could inspire so many people. Not just my story, but everyone who's been part of the program. I want to show that it's possible to turn toxic environments into places where people can grow and thrive." A year later, From Silence to Voice: Transforming Pain into Power was published, quickly becoming a bestseller in the business and personal development category. In the book, Emily shared not only her journey, but also anonymous stories from dozens of Pinnacle Talent Program participants, showing how small changes in the corporate environment could transform lives. During the book launch, a young woman approached her for an autograph with tears in her eyes. "You don't know me, but your program changed my life. I'm Tyler Thompson's cousin." Emily smiled, feeling that special connection that only exists between people who've lived through similar experiences. "The program was just a door," she replied. "You are the one building your own path." As Grace grew up, Emily and Daniel made every effort to raise a daughter who valued respect and empathy above status or power. They often took her to events for the program, where she met people from all walks of life and learned early on that a person's worth wasn't tied to their job title or salary. On one such occasion, when Grace was 8 years old, she asked a question that caught Emily off guard. "Mommy, is it true that Uncle Richard was a bad person who made you cry?" Emily looked at her daughter, trying to figure out where she'd heard that. Grace continued, "I heard Aunt Olivia talking to Grandpa William. She said you suffered a lot because of a bad man named Richard before you met Daddy." Choosing her words carefully, Emily replied, "Richard wasn't a bad person, sweetheart. He was someone who wasn't happy with his own life and took it out on others. Sometimes people do hurtful things when they're unhappy or afraid." "And did he make you cry?" "Yes, many times. But he also taught me to be strong and never treat others the way he treated me. Without realizing it, he helped me become who I am today." Grace thought for a moment before asking, "Did you forgive him?" "Yes, I did. Not for him, but for myself. Holding on to anger and resentment only keeps us from being happy." That conversation stayed with Grace and deeply shaped her character. Years later, when she faced her own conflict with a schoolmate who bullied her, Grace surprised her parents by handling the situation with remarkable maturity, seeking to understand the bully's motives rather than simply retaliating or playing the victim. Time passed, bringing new achievements and challenges. Olivia married Nathan, a university professor she met during a joint project between the bank and the university. Mrs. Dorothy, now in her 80s, remained sharp and active, participating in a senior support group at the community center near her home, renovated and adapted thanks to her daughter's improved financial situation. Tyler Thompson, after years of dedication to the bank, received an offer to lead a department. Before accepting, he asked to speak with Emily. "I'm afraid of becoming like my father," he confessed during their meeting. "Of letting power go to my head and starting to treat people poorly. The fact that you have this fear already shows you're different from him," Emily replied. "Richard never questioned his behavior until the end of his life. You're doing it before. You've even begun. How can I be sure I won't change? You can't, no one can. But you can set up checks and balances. Ask your team for constant feedback, create anonymous communication channels, do regular self-assessments." After a pause, she added, "And remember, leadership isn't about power, it's about service. You're there to help your team succeed, not to feel superior to them." Tyler implemented all of Emily's suggestions and became one of the most beloved and respected managers at the bank, breaking the cycle of toxicity his father had perpetuated. When Grace turned 16, she expressed her desire to do a summer internship at the bank in the Pinnacle Talent Program area. Emily and Daniel hesitated at first, worried that employees might treat their daughter differently because of who she was. "I want to start at the bottom, just like you did, Mum," Grace insisted. "I don't want any privileges." They agreed on one condition. Grace would use only the last name Parker, not Harrison, and would be treated like any other intern. Daniel made it clear to the team that she should receive no special treatment and that any favoritism would be frowned upon. That summer, Grace got her first taste of the corporate world, with all its complexities and social dynamics. Without her colleagues knowing who she really was, Grace was able to observe genuine behaviors and better understand her parents' work. During a departmental meeting, she witnessed a manager mistreating an assistant, constantly interrupting her and belittling her contributions. To everyone's surprise, the young intern raised her hand. "Excuse me, sir, but I think Rachel was making an important point that deserves consideration." An awkward silence filled the room. The manager, taken aback by the unexpected intervention, allowed Rachel to continue. After the meeting, the assistant thanked Grace for her support. "No one has ever stood up for me like that before," Rachel confessed. "Everyone deserves to be heard," Grace replied simply. When Emily learned of the incident, she felt a mix of pride and worry. Her daughter had inherited her sense of justice, but also her tendency to confront power imbalances, which could put her in difficult positions. During a family dinner, Emily asked her daughter about the episode. "I had no choice, Mom," Grace explained. "After all the stories you've told me, everything I've learned about the program, how could I stay silent seeing someone treated like that?" Daniel smiled, exchanging a knowing glance with his wife. "She's just like you," he said, "for better or worse." Emily thought about how her own experience of humiliation had, in a way, created a positive legacy. Her daughter had grown up with a keen awareness of respect and dignity in the workplace, something she herself had learned the hard way. At the internship closing ceremony, it was revealed to everyone that Grace was actually the daughter of the board chairman and the creator of the Pinnacle Talent Program. The news caused a stir among her colleagues, especially Rachel and the manager she had confronted. "Why didn't you say who you were?" Rachel asked, bewildered. "Because I wanted to be judged by my work and my actions, not my last name," Grace replied. That summer marked the beginning of Grace's professional journey. She decided to study organizational psychology to better understand workplace behaviors and find ways to create healthier work cultures. 20 years had passed since that fateful day when Daniel had walked into the department and witnessed Richard humiliating Emily. Pinnacle Bank had transformed significantly under their leadership. The Pinnacle Talent Program had expanded to all branches and inspired similar programs at other financial institutions. On a sunny afternoon, Daniel, now with completely grey hair, and Emily, silver strands framing her face, walked through the park near their home. They were about to hand over the program's leadership to a new generation, led by Grace, who had become a respected organizational culture consultant. If you could go back in time and say something to that young secretary crying in the bathroom, what would you tell her? Daniel asked, holding his wife's hand. Emily thought for a moment before answering. I'd tell her the pain has purpose, that the humiliations wouldn't define her forever, and that one day she'd use all that experience to help others avoid the same fate. After a pause, she added with a smile, and I'd also tell her to slap Richard much sooner because that was incredibly liberating. They both laughed, partners in building a story bigger than themselves, a story that began with humiliation and ended with transformation, not just of their own lives, but of an entire institution and the hundreds of people who had gone through the program. The following week, during the management handover ceremony for the Pinnacle Talent Program, Emily took the stage for her farewell speech. Looking at the audience, she saw familiar and unfamiliar faces, people who had been directly or indirectly impacted by her journey. 20 years ago, I was a secretary who swallowed my tears while enduring daily humiliations from a manager who couldn't see beyond his own insecurities. Today I stand before you, not because I found a Prince Charming who saved me. She glanced affectionately at Daniel in the front row. Though he was essential in my journey, but because I learned that our true strength comes from our ability to turn pain into purpose. Emily paused, looking at Grace, who was waiting to take the microphone. This program wasn't created just to identify talent, but to ensure no one has to compromise their dignity to keep a job, to make sure a person's worth is recognized regardless of their background, appearance, or position, and to remind us all that behind every role, there's a human being with dreams, fears, and immense potential. By the end of her speech, the audience gave a standing ovation. Between tears and smiles, Emily symbolically passed the baton to Grace, who hugged her mother with pride. Backstage, Daniel waited with a bouquet of roses. When Emily approached, he held her tightly. "You've transformed not just your life, but everyone around you," he whispered in her ear, "including mine." That night, at home, alone after the big celebration, Emily and Daniel sat on the porch, gazing at the city lights. They had begun a new chapter of their lives, quieter but no less meaningful. "You know what's funny?" Emily said, breaking the comfortable silence. "If it weren't for Richard and his humiliations, maybe we'd never have met that way. Maybe you'd never have really noticed me." "I would have noticed you," Daniel replied with conviction. "Maybe not at that exact moment, but eventually. Extraordinary people like you don't go unnoticed for long. Still, it's strange to think we owe part of our happiness to someone who tried to hurt us." Daniel took his wife's hand in his. "That's the greatest lesson I've learned from you over the years. Good can bloom even in the unlikeliest soil. You turned humiliation into dignity, not just for yourself, but for hundreds of others." As the night deepened, the couple remained there, reflecting on the journey they'd traveled together. From a relationship born in painful circumstances, a deep and transformative love had blossomed, one that transcended the personal and touched countless other lives. And so the cycle of humiliation Richard had started years ago became a legacy of respect, dignity, and opportunity that would continue far beyond them, through Grace and all those touched by the Pinnacle Talent Program. The end, and you. Have you ever faced humiliation at work? How did you handle it? Your story could have a happy ending too. Don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories that show even in the toughest situations, there's always hope. We'd love to read your comment.